Relax, you're about to receive everything you've imagined. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard taught that the very word relax is not a suggestion but an instruction, a command hidden inside your own desire, showing you exactly how the gift arrives into your hands. Turn with me to the 46th Psalm, where it is written, "Be still, and know that I am God." And Neville would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? This is not an ancient king addressing distant armies. This is your own deeper self speaking to your struggling, straining, striving self, telling you to stop pushing against the river and simply know, simply assume, simply rest in the awareness that I am, is already the creative power fashioning your world from the inside out." And the quiet tragedy Neville pointed to again and again is that the very people begging for their desire to be fulfilled are the ones working hardest to prevent its arrival, gripping, checking, forcing, when the whole secret was always to be still. And here is where you and I step into it together, not as spectators of an old story, but as the very ones being addressed right now. So let us claim it in the first person, present tense, the way Neville always insisted we must. Say it with me. I relax into the wish already fulfilled. I receive my desire now as a settled fact. I rest in the feeling of the end. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I relax into the wish already fulfilled. I receive my desire now as a settled fact. I rest in the feeling of the end. Imagination creates my reality. And if something in you just went quiet reading those words, if some old grip loosened even slightly, then type the two words, "I relax," in the comments below. Right now, before you go any further, let it be your seal on everything that follows. The first key is understanding that to relax is not to grow lazy or careless about your desire, it is to grow precise about where your attention belongs. So many of you have been taught that getting anything worth having requires strain, requires white-knuckled effort, requires watching the outer world for evidence, checking the phone, checking the mailbox, checking the mirror, checking the bank balance. And Neville Goddard taught that all of this checking is really a confession that you do not yet believe. And unbelief cannot help but strain, because in your heart you have moved the goal outside of yourself into some future moment controlled by circumstance. But relax. And consider a woman waiting on a certain letter. If she truly believes the letter is coming, she goes about her day. She does not sit by the mailbox for 6 hours. Her peace is the evidence of her assumption, and it is not the mailbox that brings the letter. It is not the checking that hurries it along. It is the calm, unhurried knowing that lets her live her day while the letter makes its way to her. And consider, too, the man who wants a certain outcome at work. He rehearses the conversation with his boss 10 times before it happens, tightening his jaw a little more with each rehearsal, and by the time the actual conversation arrives, he has already lived it badly a dozen times in his own mind. So is it any wonder the outer moment feels heavy? He built the heaviness himself, hour by hour. Long before anyone else said a word, this is what Neville meant when he said, "Imagination creates your reality." The created thing does not need your supervision once it is truly assumed. It is not effort that manifests the wish. It is the relaxed assumption that it is already so. Notice, too, how a child asks for something and simply expects it. No strategy, no anxious replaying of every possible refusal. Only a plain, uncomplicated expectancy, and it is this same plain expectancy Neville pointed us back toward. Not something exotic or difficult to reach, but something you already knew before the world taught you to strain for what you want. So today, notice where you are straining. Notice where your body has grown tight around a desire. Your shoulders lifted, your breath shallow, your jaw set as though bracing for a blow that has not even been thrown, and let that tightness be your signal, not to work harder, not to check again, but to come home to the feeling of already having. Breathe it out slowly, and feel how the desire settles the moment you stop fighting for it. Once you feel this in your body, you will understand why Neville never taught striving. He taught assuming, and assuming by its very nature is restful. I relax because the outcome is already settled within me. But relaxing into a feeling is only the doorway. The real question is which state you are relaxing into. And that question opens into something deeper still. The second key is knowing that you do not chase objects, you move into states. And this changes everything about how you relax, because Neville Goddard taught that the world you see is not a fixed thing you must go out and rearrange, it is a projection of consciousness, and consciousness is always resting somewhere, in the state of lack or the state of fulfillment, in the state of fear or the state of peace, and it is not the object out there that determines your state. It is your state that determines which object shows up out there. Think of it like a radio. The songs are already playing in the air all around you, every station broadcasting at once. But you only ever hear the one your dial is tuned to, and your dial is nothing more than your assumption, your settled feeling about who you are and what is already true for you. When you shift the dial, the song in the room changes instantly, not because you dragged a new song across the city, but because you tuned into what was already there waiting to be heard. And Neville taught this same truth another way. He said, consciousness is like a house of many rooms, already furnished, already complete. The room of lack fully decorated with its worry and its waiting. The room of fulfillment fully decorated with its ease and its quiet certainty. And you are not building a new room when you desire something. You are simply choosing which room to walk into and live inside of. So picture a woman scrolling through job listings late at night, feeling behind, feeling passed over. And notice, she is not lacking opportunity out there. She is standing inside the room called not enough, and everything she sees from that room, the listings that require more experience, the silence after an application, confirms the room she is standing in. Now picture her instead closing the laptop, breathing, and quietly stepping into another room already furnished within her, the room where she is already valued, already chosen, already settled into good work. She does not need to redecorate the outer world first. She only needs to walk into the room that is already hers and stay there. So when you relax, ask yourself honestly, which room am I standing in right now? Am I rehearsing what is missing, or am I resting in the feeling of the one who already has? A man wanting a promotion does not need to manipulate his employer. He needs to relax into the state of the man already promoted, waking with that quiet confidence, walking the halls a little taller, speaking in meetings as one already trusted with more, and slowly, without strain, without pleading, the outer circumstances rearrange themselves to match the inner room he has chosen to live in. It is not the world that must change first. It is not the world that must change first. It is your assumption that must change first, and the world, being only a mirror, follows. And here is the part that quietly undoes so much needless suffering. You are not your state. You are the one who moves through states. You can leave the room called fear the same way you left a room in your own home as a child, simply by walking out of it and into another. And once you understand that you are never chasing a thing, but only ever occupying a room, a state, an assumption, you begin to see something even more startling, that you are never even reacting to other people, you are reacting to yourself. The third key is the teaching Neville Goddard called, "Everyone is you pushed out." And this key alone will change how you relax around other people forever, because most of us think our peace depends on someone else changing first, the difficult coworker softening, the distant partner reaching out, the skeptical family member finally believing in us, and so we hold our breath, we brace, we negotiate with people as though they were separate powers we must manage. But Neville taught that every person appearing in your world is a character cast by your own consciousness, wearing a face, speaking lines, playing back to you the very state you occupy within. He said it plainly. The world and all within it is yourself pushed out, and it is not a poetic flourish. It is a description of how consciousness actually operates. So let's walk through an ordinary day and watch this happen in real time. You wake at 7 and check your messages first thing, already bracing for bad news. By 7:15, a message arrives that reads exactly like bad news. You arrive at work at 9 carrying a quiet assumption that you are overlooked. By 10, your manager walks past without a glance, confirming it. You go to lunch at noon feeling unseen, and the stranger at the counter is short with you, confirming it again. By 3 in the afternoon, a friend cancels plans by text, and you decide the whole world has grown cold and careless, not realizing that not one of these people was ever separate from your inner weather. They were mirrors, faithful, obedient mirrors, reflecting the state you carried since 7 in the morning. And here is the relaxing part. If they are mirrors, you were never at the mercy of the glass. You only ever needed to change your own face. It is not that the day was unkind, it is that the day was accurate. And accuracy, once you understand it, is not something to fear, it is something to use. Consider a woman who feels invisible. She notices that in meetings her ideas are spoken over, at home her preferences are overlooked. Even strangers seem to walk past her without seeing her at all, and she could spend years trying to rearrange every single person around her, correcting this one, educating that one, and still find a new face waiting to overlook her tomorrow. But the moment she stops treating the mirror as the problem, and begins to relax into the assumption I am seen, I am valued, not as a hope whispered upward, but as a settled fact she already occupies quietly within her own being, something shifts. Not everyone at once, not dramatically, but steadily. The very same people begin treating her differently. A colleague pauses to ask her opinion. A stranger holds a door and meets her eyes. Her family begins to notice small things about her they had missed for years. And none of this is coincidence. And none of it required her to explain herself to anyone. It required only that she change on the inside, because the mirror had no argument to make. The mirror had no plan of its own. The mirror could only ever reflect. It is not that people are difficult. It is that your assumption was difficult, and they were only echoing it back to you with perfect obedience. And this is why arguing with people rarely changes anything lasting. You can win the conversation and still meet the same face again tomorrow wearing a different name, because you argued with the reflection instead of relaxing the one who casts it. So this week, pause for a moment and pick one real relationship in your life that feels strained. Someone whose tone seems to sting more than it should. Someone whose silence feels heavier than silence ought to feel. And instead of rehearsing what is wrong with them tonight, ask yourself honestly what state you have been quietly assuming about yourself in their presence. Unseen, unheard, unwanted, second-guessed, and then, gently, privately, without announcing it to anyone, begin to relax into the opposite, feeling it not as a wish but as an already accomplished fact, and watch, patiently, the way you would watch a photograph slowly developing, how the mirror has no choice but to change its reflection, because that is the only thing a mirror has ever known how to do. I relax because everyone before me is only showing me myself, but if people are mirrors of your state, then the question becomes how do you actually hold a new state long enough for it to become the only mirror you ever meet? And that requires something Neville taught with great tenderness. The fourth key is persistence, in the assumption, and its quieter partner, the art of revision, because Neville Goddard taught that a single beautiful feeling held for one afternoon is lovely, but it is persistence that turns a feeling into a fact. Imagination creates your reality, yes, but only the imagination you return to, again and again, the one you keep coming home to, even after the day tried to talk you out of it. And here is the plain truth most people never hear. It is not the strength of the assumption that manifests it. It is the repetition of the assumption that manifests it. A single warm afternoon of believing does nothing for the farmer if he does not return to that same field the next morning and the morning after that. So consider a man who wants a certain position at his company. On Monday he feels it. He walks through the office in his mind already carrying the new title, and by Monday evening he is glowing. But Tuesday brings a passed-over meeting, a colleague promoted instead, and by Tuesday night he has quietly dropped the assumption and picked up disappointment instead. And this is the ordinary tragedy Neville warned against. One feeling held and then abandoned the moment life offers contrary evidence, because contrary evidence will always show up while the old state still lingers in the world. That is simply how growing things work. The seed does not become the tree overnight. and the gardener who checks the soil each morning and pulls it up to see if the root has grown will kill the very thing he is trying to raise. So persistence means returning to the assumption on Tuesday exactly as fully as you held it on Monday, regardless of what Tuesday appears to show you, not gritting your teeth, not white-knuckling belief, simply and calmly coming home to the feeling again, the way you come home to your own house at the end of a long day, without needing to prove to yourself that the house still stands. You simply walk back in, so pause for a moment and pick one real desire you have been holding, and ask yourself honestly, have I assumed its fulfillment once, in a hopeful moment, and then spent the rest of the day proving myself wrong, noticing the lack, rehearsing the delay, describing the problem to anyone who will listen? Because every time you do this, you are not being persistent. You are simply changing the channel again, and Neville gave us revision precisely for these moments, at the end of each day, before sleep. Look back over the hours, and wherever a scene disappointed you, a conversation that stung, a moment that confirmed the old lack, do not leave it as it happened. Rewrite it in imagination exactly as you wish it had gone. Feel the corrected version as real, and let that revised scene become the day's true memory. Picture a woman who argued with her sister that afternoon, sharp words exchanged, both of them wounded, and that night, instead of replaying the argument and feeding it with attention, she lies down and revises it gently. She imagines the conversation going tenderly instead. She hears her own voice softer. She feels her sister's hand on hers. She lets the new version settle in, as though it were what actually happened. And Neville taught that imagination does not know the difference between what occurred and what is vividly reimagined and deeply felt. So the revised evening becomes, for all creative purposes, the real evening. This is not denial. This is authorship. You are the writer of your own past, as surely as your future. And revision is simply persistence applied backward, refusing to let a single disappointing scene harden into a permanent assumption about how people treat you or what life is like for you. So relax tonight, not into what occurred, but into what you have lovingly revised. And tomorrow morning, relax again into the same assumption you held before, unmoved by whatever the day in between seemed to say. I persist in my assumption until the world has no choice but to agree with me. Take a breath with me here, and if this teaching is doing something in you, subscribe so the next one finds you gently. There is more waiting, and I would love for you to have it. The fifth key is the deepest one, the one Neville Goddard called the state akin to sleep. And everything you have learned so far has been quietly preparing you for this, because this is where relaxing stops being a metaphor and becomes an actual, physical, nightly practice. This is the key that gathers up every other key and gives it a place to live, a time, a posture, a doorway you can walk through tonight without waiting for anything else to change first. First, consider why sleep matters so much to this teaching. Neville taught that the moment just before natural sleep is the most creative moment of your day, because in that drowsy, heavy-lidded state, your critical, argumentative, reasoning mind grows quiet, the part of you that objects, that says impossible, that lists every reason your desire cannot come true. That voice grows drowsy along with your body, and what remains is pure, uncontested feeling, and feeling, Neville said, is the secret, not visualizing with your eyes, not reciting words with your lips, but feeling, the wordless, bodily sense of a wish already fulfilled. So the state akin to sleep is not sleep itself. It is that narrow, golden doorway just before it, when you are relaxed enough that resistance has gone quiet, but awake enough to still direct the drama in your mind. Think of it as the hinge between two rooms, the room of waking argument behind you, the room of assumption ahead of you, and you are standing right on the hinge, neither fully in one nor fully in the other, and it is precisely there, on that hinge, that the new state gets pressed into you like a seal pressed into warm wax. Too firm to argue with, too soft to resist. Second, consider how to actually enter it, and let's walk through it slowly together. At night, lying down, let your body grow heavy, let your breathing slow. Do nothing to force this. Simply allow it the way you allow yourself to grow sleepy on any ordinary night. And once you feel that pleasant, drowsy heaviness, choose one small, natural scene that would only happen if your wish were already fulfilled. Not a grand cinematic fantasy, but something small and intimate. A friend saying congratulations, a hand resting on your shoulder in celebration, the particular way a phone would feel in your palm carrying the good news. And Neville always emphasized smallness here. The smaller and more natural the scene, the easier it is to enter. And the easier it is to feel real, because a small scene slips past the guarding, reasoning mind, while a grand one triggers its objections. A grand scene announces itself loudly, and the old skeptical self rises up to meet it. But a small scene walks in quietly, almost unnoticed, and by the time the skeptic thinks to object, the feeling has already settled in and made itself at home. Let me give you a picture of this so it is not left as theory. Imagine a man who has been estranged from his brother for years, the silence between them heavy, familiar, almost comfortable in its sadness. And he has tried everything in waking life, the careful letters, the mutual friends, the long-rehearsed speeches he never delivers, and none of it moves the silence an inch. And one night, lying in the dark, exhausted from trying, he simply stops trying, he lets his body grow heavy, he lets the day drain out of him, and in that drowsy hush he does not imagine a grand reunion with fireworks and speeches. He imagines something almost embarrassingly small, his phone buzzing on the nightstand, his brother's name lighting up the screen, and himself simply saying, "Hey, good to hear your voice." And feeling, right there in the dark, the small ordinary warmth of that sentence leaving his own mouth. He does this for a few minutes only, feeling it, not watching it, and then he lets himself drift into sleep still holding that warmth. And he does this again the next night, and the next, not begging, not straining, simply visiting that small imagined moment, the way you visit a familiar room. And weeks later his phone actually does buzz, and his brother's name actually does appear, and the words that come out of his own mouth are, without his even planning them, "Hey, good to hear your voice." And this is what Neville meant when he said, "Imagination creates your reality," not a distant technique performed at arm's length, but a small felt scene, entered nightly, until the world had no choice but to arrange itself to match what had already become familiar within. Third, consider the quality of engagement. Because this is not watching a scene like a movie on a screen in front of you. Neville was insistent about this distinction. You are not the audience. You are the participant. You must feel yourself inside the scene, seeing through your own eyes, feeling the textures, hearing the voice as though your own ears are receiving it right now. If you imagine a handshake, feel the actual pressure of the hand in yours. If you imagine an embrace, feel the warmth of it against your own chest. If you imagine a voice on the phone, feel the phone's weight, feel the little tilt of your head as you listen. This is what Neville meant when he said imagination creates your reality. Not a distant imagination observed from outside, but an imagination inhabited from within, lived in, breathed in, felt from the inside as your own actual experience happening now. Most people fail here not because they lack imagination, but because they keep stepping outside of it to check whether it is working. And checking is simply another form of the straining we already spoke of. So tonight, if you catch yourself watching the scene like a spectator, gently step back inside it. Become the one to whom it is happening, rather than the one observing it happen. Fourth, consider what happens when you do this correctly. Drowsy, relaxed, immersed, feeling the small scene from within. You will notice something remarkable. The scene begins to feel less like something you are constructing and more like something you are remembering. And this is the sign Neville pointed to again and again, the sign that assumption has taken hold. When the imagined scene stops feeling invented and starts feeling recalled, you have crossed from wishing into believing, from hoping into knowing, and this is precisely the crossing the still small verse describes. The stilling of the striving self, the quiet knowing that I am is already the fact of the matter. Some nights this crossing happens quickly, almost the first time you try, and other nights it takes many visits before the invented feeling ripens into a remembered one, and either way is fine. Because Neville never measured this by speed, he measured it by sincerity of feeling. Fifth, consider what to do if your mind wanders back to problems, because it will. Some nights the bills interrupt, some nights the old argument replays. And this is not failure, it is simply the reasoning mind trying to reassert itself before it has been fully quieted. Gently, without frustration, without scolding yourself, return to the small scene. Feel it again, let your breath slow again, and trust that even a few minutes of true feeling, repeated night after night, accomplishes more than hours of tense, effortful visualizing, because Neville always taught that it is not the duration that convinces, it is the depth of the feeling. A few minutes deeply felt outweighs an hour merely watched, and if some nights nothing seems to land at all, do not treat that as evidence against you. Simply lie down the next night and try again. The doorway is always there waiting. It does not close because you missed it once. Sixth, consider why this must be done lying down, relaxed, near sleep, rather than sitting upright with effort. Because Neville taught that in ordinary waking hours your five senses shout so loudly that imagination can barely be heard beneath them, but in that drowsy threshold, the senses grow quiet, and imagination, finally permitted to speak at full volume, is received by consciousness the way seed is received by soft, waiting soil. Hard ground refuses the seed, but softened ground welcomes it. Drowsiness is the softening, relaxation is the welcome, and this is why no amount of forceful daytime affirmation ever carries the same weight as a few honest minutes felt on the edge of sleep. The ground simply was not soft enough to receive it. And so you begin to see why the entire video has led here. Why relax was never a soft suggestion, but the literal operating instruction: be still. And no, not strain and hope, not force and check, but relax into feeling until the feeling convinces you it is already so. I enter the state akin to sleep, and I plant my wish in soil too soft to refuse it. And once a wish has been planted this deeply, there remains only one more thing to understand: what happens to you, to your very sense of identity, once the harvest begins to show itself in the world. The sixth key is the return to I am, the quiet center that has been running beneath every other key in this teaching. Because Neville Goddard taught that I am is not merely a phrase, it is the naked awareness of being, prior to any state, prior to any circumstance, the very power that named itself in the burning bush and told Moses, I am that I am, and Neville read that flame the way he read every scripture, not as ancient fire on a distant mountain, but as your own awareness, ever burning, ever present, never consumed, and every desire you have ever held is simply, I am, wanting to express itself more fully through you. So when you relax, you are not performing a technique on some object outside yourself. You are returning I am to its rightful stillness, and from that stillness, all things arrange themselves according to the state you have assumed. Consider a man who spent years assuming himself the overlooked one at his company, passed over, unseen, and one day, through the very keys you have just learned, the promotion finally comes, and you would think relief would follow. But instead, something strange happens. He walks the halls uneasy, he waits for someone to notice a mistake and take it back. He still flinches at his old desk, though it is no longer his, and this is because he mistook the old lack for himself. He thought, I am the overlooked one, when in truth, he was only ever I am, wearing the overlooked one the way a man wears a coat on a cold morning, and a coat is not the man inside it. So when the coat changes, when the promotion, the healing, the reunion, the answered prayer finally arrives, do not let yourself believe that this new circumstance is who you are either. It is only the new coat, and I am remains the one wearing it, untouched, unhurried, unclaimed by either the lack before or the fulfillment now. This is why Neville taught that you must never worship the state you have moved into any more than the one you left, because the moment you forget that you are the wearer and not the garment, you begin again to strain, checking, guarding, fearing loss, and the whole relaxed assumption quietly unravels. This is why relax is the final instruction and not merely the first one. Relax into the feeling, yes. Relax into the state, yes. But beneath both of these, relax into I am itself. The one constant beneath every coat you will ever wear. The one presence that was there before the lack. That was there through the assuming. That will be there after the fulfillment. And that recognition, quiet as a single flame in a dark and settled room, is the only ground that never shifts beneath you. So tonight, and every night from here forward, let relax be your whole instruction. Relax into the feeling. Relax into the state. Relax into I am. And let the receiving take care of itself. Because it always does. I am at rest. And because I am at rest, everything I have imagined is already on its way to me. Here is the whole picture. It is not effort that manifests the wish. It is the relaxed assumption that it is already so. It is not the world that must change first. It is your assumption that must change first. It is not that people are difficult. It is that your assumption was difficult, and they only echoed it back to you. It is not a single hopeful feeling that manifests. It is the persisted assumption. Revised nightly, that becomes fact. It is not watching a scene from outside. It is living it from within until it feels remembered rather than imagined. And it is not any technique at all beneath every key. It was always I am, resting, recognized, undisturbed, 6 keys, but really one recognition wearing 6 different faces. Relax, and let I am do what it has always done. Say it with me one final time. I relax into the wish already fulfilled. I receive my desire now as a settled fact. I rest in the feeling of the end. Imagination creates my reality. And so you see, you were never asked to strain for what you want. You were only ever asked to relax, because you truly are, even now, about to receive everything you've imagined.